Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're having a look at the Knobula Monumatic. The Monumatic, what a lovely thing. What an absolutely lovely thing. I've really enjoyed the last couple of days I've spent with it. Digging into the insides, what it does, what it can do. It's both sort of fascinating and instantly absolutely useful. It can drop straight into any patch, any place, and provides a kind of a gorgeous synthesizer experience. Now, within its own limitations, because it is a synthesizer. It's an 8-voice polyphonic virtual analog synthesizer. And it comes with great big satchels, great big heavy bags of vibey, analogy, vintagey, moving, gooey, detuning, beating, bumping kind of sounds. And the great thing is that every single sound you seem to get out of it is an absolute sweet spot. There's no duds at all, because what we have here is a multi-oscillator synthesizer, a bit like the braids or the plaits of old from mutable instruments, that kind of thing. But what throws itself at me almost immediately in playing through it and browsing through it and discovering what it does is that you get none of that lurch from analog waveforms, virtual analog, suddenly into FM, into the clangy and glassiness of wavetable or other such bits and bobs. No. Within the Monumatic is engine after engine of sumptuous analog vibe. So you could say that therefore perhaps it lacks some versatility. Yeah, maybe. But what it does have is crowd-pleasing sounds that you're going to enjoy absolutely every time. So if you are deeply into your FM, strangely timbred harmonic bits and pieces, then perhaps this is not for you. But if, like most people, you just want a bloody good synthesizer sound, then this is going to serve that up. And it's going to serve that up in 16 different and interesting ways. That's going to get you playing, that's going to get you integrating it into your system and fulfilling role after role within your Eurorack. It's like a JP8000 within a little module. It's pretty phenomenal, really. But also it has two personalities, because I think Knobula kind of learnt from the Polyphonic, which is the one that came before this, which is now discontinued. The Monumatic is carrying this idea forward. And one of the struggles, I think, the Polyphonic was excellent, don't get me wrong, but one of the struggles that it had was really identifying itself as to what it was offering people. And I think it came in for perhaps a bit of misunderstanding in that, I bought this polyphonic module for my Eurorack, and yet I can't play anything polyphonically because I have CV gate. But I think that tended to take people a little bit by surprise. So when it's come to the Monumatic, which shares a lot of the ideas of the Polyphonic, they have marketed it absolutely, and I think clinically brilliantly, as a CV gate monosynth monster, I suppose, or a MIDI polyphonic synthesizer. And that's definitely the way to address it. Because if you've just got CV and gate, you can get some fantastically stacked, overlapping maybe, monophonic sounds out of this thing. And it's fantastic. There's also a chord mode that we will certainly come to. But via MIDI, via a keyboard, it opens it up to a whole other realm of stuff. And I think it's important that people understand that it is these two things and you address them differently. Otherwise, if you've just got CV gate, you may feel like you're missing out on a whole world, which you are, if you don't also poke it with a bit of MIDI. And so in some ways it has this split personality, or is it a more fledged out personality where it can do more than one thing? It's much more than this, it's much more than that. Together it can be quite a thing. Maybe you're going to need 2, 3, maybe. Don't know. We shall see. So built in to the Monumatic are 16 sound engines, 16 oscillator modes, if you like. You dial it in on a nice big whacking great big knob here, and then that is pushed via a little bit of synth adjustment into a filter, of which there are 6 types, controlled by an envelope which controls the VCA and the filter, and then there's a couple of effects at the end. So it's an entire synthesizer in a small space. Now it does not have every single control that you would have on a big synthesizer. It can't possibly do that, and it doesn't really need that. So you're not going to get wave shaping necessarily, wave folding, or get cross modulation, deciding to add a bit of noise in there, or the other bits that you would get on a larger synthesizer, or indeed on individual modules. It has a restricted, curated set of parameters that essentially form themselves around a macro knob, this detune knob, that throws either things apart, or it adjusts the pulse width, or it deepens a Leslie effect. This, that and the other adds to each of the engines just to give you a little bit of a place to go if you so want to. So in some ways, when I've been thinking about this, it's a little bit like a Polymoog, in that you kind of have these preset engines, these sounds which you dial up, which then give you control over the filtering and the effects and the envelopes, those normal sort of synth things. But you're starting essentially with a set engine which is going to be the basis of your sound. And what that does is it makes it very, very simple, very, very intuitive, And it's not the sort of thing you're going to get lost in trying to sound design or craft some particular special sound you're trying to tease out of the synthesizer. No, it's just sound after sound of absolutely phenomenally usable voices. So you can just get straight in, no mucking about, not going to spend your whole time trying to find a sound. You just pick one and go with it. And that I'm painting most definitely as a pro as opposed to a con. You know, you can approach it from a different angle and say, oh, well, it doesn't have all the versatility I need. I need all of those changes, all of that. And that's great. That's why you have a modular. You can do all those things. But what Monumatic appears to be offering, at least from my perspective, is just a phenomenally good switch on and go, choose a sound, bash. You've got a great sounding synthesizer with a great sounding filter, with enough control, front panel stuff to get you going and to get things moving, and it's going to contribute greatly to the sort of sounds and the environments and the padding out of stuff, or bass lines or leads, whatever it is you want to use it for. It is absolutely there to do that. So Monumatic is there for the players much more than the fiddlers. But let's have a fiddle and see what we can make of it. So I'm going to bring you in, we'll have a look at it a little bit closer, I'll go through all the different bits. Shall we go through every single time? I don't know, we'll fiddle with most of the sounds at some point, because there's always a couple of ways of presenting it. You can present it as a stabby chord organy kind of thing where it's da, 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 because Knobula very much come from a dance music background. That's their love, that's their passion. And so the chord mode in here and using chords with it seems to be the way that it gets demonstrated the most. And that's fine, that's all right. But what I've enjoyed really is picking out the longer, organic, more evolutionary way that the sounds can move and travel. There is modulation. You can throw CVs and gates in, and using those CV inputs actually gives you access to some really interesting things. It's also MPE compatible, so if you have a squishy keyboard of some kind, you can use that. You know, the MIDI side of Monumatic is really quite phenomenal. So let's have a fiddle around and see if we can work out what on earth's going on. Right, just to take you through the basic layout. Now, some of the text is really small. Some of the buttons are a little bit sort of fiddly. There are elements of usability in here which can be a little bit challenging. But hey, I'm yet to come across a fully, completely and absolutely satisfactory front end to anything. But maybe that's just me. So we have our oscillator section in the middle here. So you have your selection on this slightly strange knob. I mean, you've got 16 different engines that you've tried to get into an indented knob. And that kind of works. You've got this sticky out bit here, which helps you, fully grasp which direction you're heading in, I suppose. But it does also have a habit of being over the top of the thing you've selected, so you can't actually read it anymore. So I've never known what these two over here say, because you can't see them. So that's the thing, but it's probably better to navigate this by ear than it is by reading the impossibly small writing or the hieroglyphs. But the general idea is that you've got some super saws. In fact, look, why don't I get the quick start guide, because that's going to help us. You can download that from the website, and that might help you. That might help you too. You see, it might help you too. That's Is that easier to see? I don't know. Anyway, it's going to help me be able to read them, I suppose. So you've got, over here, you've got some super saws. You've got some synced ones. Synced, which is sawtooth and square wave dual oscillators using some hard sync, I think, between them. You've then got a CZ phase distortion option. I will make sounds of these at some point soon. You then got a bunch of different pulse waves of different sizes. You then got a percussive pulse wave, a percussive organ, or organ with percussion turned on, and then a couple of other organs. They were really nice actually on the Polyphonic, I seem to recall. And then you've got an ensemble, so that's like a Selena strings. You then got this really nice weird warbly tapey thing. Then a couple of other modulated ones. One like the X8, the Oberheim, based on, and one like Vox Humana from the Polymoog. Funnily enough, as I was mentioning earlier, it does strike me as being like that, where you select essentially a preset. These are really, that's what it's given you. It's given you 16 presets, which you then filter and affect. That's really it. And that's why it's good. So I keep flip-flopping between that. Oh, well, it's a little bit restrictive. Yeah, it is, but that's good. The reason is that you can sit down with it, choose a sound and go. I'm not having to craft a sound. I have to come up with something. I just choose a sound and go. And that's really why, that's sort of why plates and braids and things like that were really good, because you have this access to different bunches of sounds that were just there ready to dial in. And this is very much that vibe, but it does it in an absolute no holds barred analog kind of synthesizer way. And that, for me, ticks all my boxes, tickles all my fancies, you could say. And that's why this is really, really working for me. Really working. So anyway, that's your oscillator section. You then got this detune knob here, which at a basic level, like it did on the Polyphonic, it starts to detune the oscillators, so they push apart and you get this lovely gooey sound. But then it goes a bit mad, and then it eventually pulls a fifth together, and then it goes all the way around and brings in a sub-octave. So that's a thing. That's a thing. With, depending on which one you're on, it can also do different things. And we'll explore a little bit of that in a minute. After this section here, you've got a bit of pitch control here. You then go into the filter. 6 different filter types. You've got a couple of low passes. You've got a phase, something or other. A vocal, throaty one, high pass, and a notch filter all in there. You've got overdrive on a tiny, tiny little switch, and different types on the switch. You've got envelope depth, and then key following, off, half, or full. Then at the top, you've got an envelope, just attack, decay, sustain. I never quite worked out what that means, but you know, we get the hang of it as we play with it. And release, which makes a lot more sense. All the way down the bottom again, you've got a reverb. You do also have a chorus hidden away in here as well under a shift button. And then underneath that, you've got this chord system, and you've got some other bits and pieces like a pitch envelope and panning on the voices. Stuff like that, all just little things sort of squirreled away in the background. But really what you do is you select a sound, you filter it, and you enjoy it. Really, that's sort of it. So let's start off using some MIDI and just playing some sounds on the keyboard, which I think is often missed. Because it's a really nice, playable synthesizer. So nice. I'm just going to move this camera out of the way a little bit, give you a little bit more of a sort of side-on view, because otherwise it's just in the way. It's just in the way. How can I work like this? So we're on, what are we on? We're on the sync thing. So those are the sync elements coming in. Then you get the fifth. then you get the sub-octave. So it's always an interesting journey around this knob. I'm not always entirely convinced that that's absolutely helpful. So sometimes you'd like to be at that bit before you hear it. So that's the square wave sync, I think. If we go to the sawtooth, that's a bit more sawtoothy. Trying to remove the filter. Interesting bit of aftertouch there that I didn't know existed. Okay, go to the CZ, which is phase distortion. The reverb you can hear is just coming from the Monumatic. I've got no other effects on whatsoever. So the detune on this does something quite interesting. And there's your fifth. So I get the feeling we're going to be doing this for the rest of the day, because it's so nice. Right, so some square waves. They've got a bit of pulse wave modulation going on. That's nice and interesting and a bit boring. Then you've got some pulse waves of different sizes. Fifths, back to unison again. Another different one. Then there's one with a bit of percussion in it. And of course we're going to want to start putting a filter onto that. Then we have an organ with percussion. Turns on the Leslie, which is lovely. That's just a lovely thing. It really is nice. I'm having such a lovely time with this bank of sounds. There's a couple of other organs. Then we get to the Selena strings. Ooh. Then there's a couple of what they call noisy ones. This is the tape one, which I really like. Let's take out the craziness. Get a little bit more deterioration as you turn that up. Of course, you know, with a little bit of adjustment to things, you can very, very quickly change the sound. That's simply gorgeous. Now there's an X8. And then I don't know what this is. What's this? Oh, it's the Vox Humana. Which, if I knew how to play cars, I probably would. So next up is the super saws. The aftertouch is going a little bit wild on this keyboard at the moment. Well, what I'll do in that case, I'm going to take out the MIDI and we'll plug in via CV gate just to use, I'm using exactly the same, using exactly the same keyboard, but I've unplugged the MIDI. And I'm going to use the pitch into voltage per octave, and gate to the gate input. Now, of course, now I can't play by chords. There are no chords that enable me to be playing at this point because I'm sending in control voltage, which is just a voltage which is being interpreted as a note by the Monumatic. I can't send it multiple notes, I can only send it one at a time. Now, if I've got release up and it's still in polyphonic mode, I can overlap notes. So there's a possibility of chordage. If I want. Now there's a button here which switches it into mono mode. So now there's no overlap at all. Every note is re-triggered. So even though I've got the release up, those are not overlapping. It's so super! It's so super! Then you've got the fifths. Or a sub-octave. So as I say, let's rattle through those 16 while playing some kind of bassliney type thing. So hopefully, as you can see, it is very much two different animals. It is this sort of CV sequenceable, filterable, banging leads and basses. Modular animal, as well as being very much a MIDI synthesizer. Right, I'm going to switch back to MIDI for a minute. Take those out just so we don't confuse ourselves. It has hidden behind here a pitch envelope, which I thought I'd show because it's a bit sort of weird. So you have to get it via shift because it's on this secondary piece of writing here. Shift, and I guess you just turn that a bit. I've no idea how best to use that. but I thought I would share that. We've also got voice panning. I haven't checked that out before. Let's whack that up. Hopefully that's interesting to you. Okay, chord mode. Now, as I say, this was interesting on a Polyphonic, but it was also tricky and kind of awkward, and you always had to go back to the manual to work out how on earth do I do this again every time you come back. On the Monumatic, it's a bit simpler, I feel. I'm finding that this makes a lot more sense. I don't know actually if it is that different, but it feels different, and maybe my approach to it has evolved. Who knows? The important thing is that you can store 8 chords in here and then use those to create a polyphonic situation for your CV gate. It's all on a couple of knobs here and this button in the middle. The button in the middle triggers the current chord, which is cool. And if I was in monophonic mode with CV gating, I can enable chord mode and then play that on my single things. Let's see if I can do that. So in order to select another chord, I need to hold the trigger button, and then I can find another chord. So let me show you how you put those chords in, and also to let you know that velocity is definitely a factor here. So if you bash in a chord, it will then be full force at the other end, whereas if you just relax a little bit, it will keep that volume under control, because when you're forcing lots of notes to happen together at the same time, there's a possibility that you're going to be going into some kind of distortion or overload. So it's not necessarily the actual chord that I'm trying to get, because it's the shape of the chord, isn't it? Because it depends on what note's going to be then played via CV gate to know what's best to have. So if I have a major chord, I don't need to play a chord in C and a chord in... Do you know what I'm saying? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. So we're on this chord here, and it will remember whatever you played last. So I've played, with a bit of luck, a major. I'm then going to go to the next chord and play a minor. Next chord and play a something else. Like that. So that's given me 3 chords to play with. Let's put my CV gate back in. So the question then becomes, how do you access these chords? Because changing it in a front panel way seems to be not the smoothest way of doing things. So how do I then do that? Well, you can do it via CV. You can also do it via MIDI, funnily enough, using the mod wheel. But via CV, you can map the CV inputs to the chord select, which allows you to then select the different chords. Now, let's see how, oh, I know how I can do that. So I'm going to take the modulation out of this keyboard. This keyboard has a mod out. That will be a simple way for me to do that. So I'm going to plug this into CVA, and this is then going to show you how the mapping of the CV inputs works. So as soon as I plug something in, it flashes for a couple of seconds, and you've then got to grab the knob that you want to control. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to do that, and now hopefully that's going to be mapped. Yeah, it's definitely choosing them. I thought I had a better handle on this. Hang on. I think that gives you an idea. Obviously I can put a sequence in here to change those different chords, as long as I'm putting in the right sort of voltage, and it just takes a little bit of trial and error to kind of work that out in order to see what's going on. At the moment I've got a few chords in there which are a little bit fierce, which are causing some crackles, but you know, you just have to find the place that it works with everything else at the same time. Right, let's run it from the variegate here, and we're going to use it to also map some other bits of modulation. So let's do some modulating. That's what I mean. So I'm going to take the pitch out from the variegate, channel 1, plug that into there, and the gate into channel 2. So I'm going to take output number 3, plug that into CVA, and then I'm going to hit this mode knob and have it control which sound is being used. can also bring that in rather than from a sequence, from just a regular LFO. Let's add it into something a little bit more exotic. I could play with this for hours, I feel. So the Monumatic then, Polyphonic, 8-voice synthesizer right within your rack, doing all of the things for you that perhaps we like to do ourselves, often in modular. But if you're in a situation where perhaps you've got a small rack and you need just a synth voice which is going to do the job every single time, then this could be amazing for that. It's absolutely playable enough to give you a lot of scope for change and difference. Absolutely works brilliantly as a CV gate monophonic synthesizer that you can really lean into and do the filter stuff that you want to do, or you can explore it via MIDI and then open it up to soundscapes and environments and drones and movements and effects and evolutions. and you have these 16 starting points, which are just, they're just super. Is all I can say, really. I mean, so often in any kind of preset situation or multi-engine situation, there's usually one or two that you always use. The rest of them, you're always scanning through them. With the Monumatic, you can use them all. In some ways, they're variations on a theme. It's even when you're scanning through the different sounds, the changes are not enormous. You don't get that clash, that lurch as you're going through presets, particularly. And I really like that. I like the closeness of them. How it's almost like I've got a variation. I've got this sound, and then I can just adjust it to the sync sound, or to the X8 sound, or back to the tape sound. I can dwell around in organs that I can then filter down and then filter back out through another sound. You know, it loads quick enough to select them via CV. So you haven't got that lag, that wait for another sound to load. So it's really nicely put together. You know, it's consistent all the way through. Each sound has sweet spots. Even the lack of editing that you have is tempered by the fact that detune knob does something interesting every single time. So you're not left with just a single interpretation of something. You can push it and change it. You know, you're not going to be designing brand new sounds that no one's ever heard of. The point of this module, for me at least, is that it feeds into our familiarity, it feeds into our nostalgia and our sense of what a synthesizer sounds like. And it puts it in there. It's not new explorations, it's not new territory. It's absolutely everything that you actually want to use within a musical context. You know, and that's why it works for me, I think. Exploring things like the chords is interesting. Takes a little bit of practice, I think, just to nail that down into what it is you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do, but it is absolutely workable. And then, you know, I get to think about how I would use it in my set. If I think about it in the terms of what I tend to use, would I use it as a bass line? Probably not. I think where it would fit in my own personal playing of stuff is either as a chord dropped in from time to time, but that doesn't really use its full potential. You know, it's one aspect perhaps. What strikes me more is that combined with a decent effects module like its own Echo Cinematic that I've got up here, it can become this wonderful, paddy, rich, synthesizer-y backdrop. It could fill that space between one patch and another. As I'm changing other things, I could hold a chord on a sustain pedal, as I did a lot during this demo, and just let it ring. Let it find itself. And then a little bit of adjustment to the filter. The filter is so nice. The way it sweeps across and changes things. You can feel the whole thing shifting. You know, pump it out into stereo, spread those voices apart. Very interesting as well. Got lots of scope for just ethereal, lovely sounds and environments that just pour out of it. Not just stabs, not just organ stabs, whole things that come out. That's probably where I would use it. Would it entice me to take a MIDI keyboard with me? Possibly. It would also encourage me to look again at the Knobula chord pilot, which is a fantastic source of MIDI chords that I've never quite gotten to the bottom of. I haven't quite worked it out. Every time I sit down with it, I scratch my head for a while and find something else to do. So this is going to hopefully encourage me back to that, because rather than playing a chord on something this and having to take this to a gig, if I could have another module that just generates those chords. I've got a couple of different ones like that. Maybe that would work really well with it. And then you could just sort of like switch those two things on and have that creating an environment over which you do a bit of changing patching and then bring something else back in. That is a brilliant use of it, I think. But heck, it's a flipping synthesizer, so use it wherever you like. I don't know why we're even worrying about it. So overall, to sum it all up, in a couple of words, so that I don't just keep running on and running on, it's good, works well, it's a little bit busy, a little bit dense on the front panel, some of that writing I can't really see, but you feel your way around, and once you've got the hang of where everything is, it's pretty brilliant. The instantness, the crowd pleasing sweet spots of those 16 sounds is really what sells it. It's just great. Sound after sound after sound, it's great. Filter sounds nice. The reverb is really nice in there. The envelopes work well enough, and that detuning knob really adds something extra, whether it's warbling and wobbling and changing or shifting or going up into fifths or sub-octaves. It's a really nice way to give you something to play and to lean into on those individual sounds, because it sounds great all the way round. So enormously fun to play, very synthy, absolutely. What a great job. Thank you, Knobula. So there you go. Hope that was helpful in an investigation into this module a little bit to some degree. I hope to post more videos on it over time, because I feel like it's going to find a place in my day-to-day rack, which is nice. So I hope that's been helpful, and in the meantime, go and make some tunes.